Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining the Hunger Free Communities Quarterly Meeting. My name is Minerva Delgado. I'm the Director of Coalitions and Advocacy at the Alliance to End Hunger, for those of you who haven't met me yet. So happy you could join us today. You'll see the agenda on the screen. And today we'll be mostly talking about the Hunger Free Communities Initiative. It's not something we normally do. Normally we have guest speakers and we're talking about topics of general interest to everyone, but we've just completed a Hunger Free Community Strategic Plan. And we hope and think this will be of great interest to all of you as we really try to strengthen this network. So welcome to all of you who are with us. Those of you who just joined us, if you can, please add your names to your organization name to your names as well, so we can get to know each other. We do plan for this to be an interactive meeting, and there will be a little time later for breakout groups where hopefully you'll get to meet some new folks that you haven't spoken to. We were really thrilled that groups from about 13 states registered for the meeting. So hopefully we have a nice diversity cross-section of groups throughout the country here today. So we're just to go quickly through the agenda. We will be reviewing the Hunger Free Community Strategic Plan, and we will have a presentation from Amanda explaining our Hunger Free Communities Research Project, which she started with, but we'll get going with sort of the more public-facing parts of this soon. So she'll talk about that. We'll talk a little bit about our summit, which is coming up November 1st. And we're going to do small group brainstorming, like breakout rooms with questions around some of the topics that you want to see presented either at the summit or through some of the other work we'll be doing, and then we'll report out from groups, and then we'll end there. So hopefully, you know, what I'd love right now is that if everyone could just introduce themselves in the chat, that would be fantastic. You know, just name, organization, if you want to add the state you're coming from. If it's not obvious from your organization name, please do. And we'll go ahead and get started. And again, hopefully some of you, you'll be meeting each other in the small group discussions a little later, but thank you for joining us and welcome. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into the review of our new Hunger Free Community Strategic Plan. I know some of you have been with the network for a while, some of you are new to the network. So this is the first sort of strategic plan for the Hunger Free Communities Network that we've done in over 5 years. And just for those of you who are new, the Hunger Free Communities Network, we currently have about 70 groups in 33 states who are partnering with us. And we partner with organizations and/or coalitions. The coalitions are typically multi-sector coalitions, but they all have the goal of ending hunger. That could be the focus of the organization or coalition, or it can be an important part of their work, but maybe they have a much broader mission where hunger and ending hunger and alleviating hunger is a part of that. And so the purpose of this network is to bring folks together because you're all similarly situated in terms of doing work in your communities, and really raise best practices and make sure that you know, you're all talking to each other so that you can really learn from what's happening in different states. And hopefully that will inform the work you're doing, as well as share out great work that you're doing in your communities that can be replicated in other areas. As I said, the Alliance to End Hunger, we just completed a strategic plan. It's a 2-year strategic plan for the Hunger Free Communities Network. So this initiative is part of the Alliance to End Hunger and is really the focus of our US-based work outside of our advocacy work. And so the plan concluded that the Hunger Free Communities Network can be a significantly more valuable asset than it is today, which is something I feel that we've been feeling for a while at the Alliance that there's a lot more that we can do to invest in this network and to really bring the value of the work that you're doing at the local level to a national audience. At present, our role at the Alliance is really to advise, support, and convene the network, and these priorities should remain. So we concluded that these are the right priorities. What we need to do is really ramp up the work that we're doing significantly to have a higher level of impact. So some of the key themes, and we interviewed folks who are part of the network. So some of you may have participated in those interviews. We also interviewed Alliance member organizations as well as Alliance staff and other key stakeholders. And some of the key themes that emerged were that people love the summit. The annual summit is very valuable, and in particular provided opportunities to connect with others who do this kind of work. And so as a result of that, the in-person format is much preferred to what we were all forced to go to, a virtual format during the pandemic. So as a result, this year will be our last fully virtual year for the summit, which is coming up November 1st. We'll talk more about that later. Continuing with some of the themes, people find great value in the connections to other hunger-free community partners, right? And some of the statements were, the Alliance connects me to others who have experiences that might help me, or the Alliance makes connections so others can learn from us. But we also know that, especially post-pandemic, many of you and your organizations are facing significant financial challenges, especially with the decline in funding post-COVID. The quarterly webinars like this one, people have found very useful, but there was an interest in making it more interactive, hence our new format that we are starting today. People also found, just continuing with some of the themes that came out of the strategic plan, that there's a real value in many of the tools that the Alliance shares, and hopefully you've all experienced some of these tools, the racial wealth gap learning simulation, the Hunger for Communities impact framework, which we will discuss later on in the meeting. Also, this is a highly challenging advocacy environment and climate for hunger-free community partners. So, for example, some states have been introducing bills to attack SNAP. There may be other advocacy challenges. We know at the federal level, it's a very difficult advocacy environment for SNAP at the moment. And just in general, with the pushback on just reducing funds for discretionary programs, we're seeing lots of challenges to WIC, for example. And finally, the last two sort of themes that emerged were that the effectiveness of groups like yours is often limited by underinvestment in operations and communications, and that there are significant opportunities to expand communities of practice and convenings with the network. So building on those themes, our strategic plan has developed 5 strategic initiatives. And I'll just tell you what they are. Enhancing, first of all, the Alliance's capacity to support the Hunger-Free Communities Initiative. So basically making sure that we at the Alliance are investing in the project adequately. For those of you who've been with us for a while, I'm the main staff person on the initiative. However, this is only half of my job, right? The other half is advocacy, and so I'm not able to spend as much time on the initiative as I would like. I've seen so many ways that we can grow the initiative, but it really requires an investment from the Alliance. So we have committed at the Alliance to put funds towards hiring a full-time associate, and we actually have that job description out on our website right now. So there will be someone consistently full-time to work with me on this project. In the past, we've gotten by with fellows and interns and vistas, but the Alliance has gotten to the point where we realize we really need to invest in this project. So that's number 1. Number 2 is enriching and expanding the convening role of this community of practice. We really think of this as a community of practice, and there's a lot more we could do with that. And You all have requested through the strategic plan more in-person convenings, including our annual summit. So we will be planning in-person regional convenings for this network and really putting resources towards that for groups that need assistance with travel, for example. So we're really excited about that. We'll plan at least one regional convening before the end of this year, maybe more. And the other thing is we're currently convening a community engagement discussion group, but we want to hear from you. What are the themes you would like to discuss in small group settings? And so part of our brainstorm later will cover that question. But for now, I'd love Aaliyah, who's working with us as an Emerson Hunger Fellow, to tell you a little bit about one of the communities of practice, one of the discussion groups that we've already started and are currently working on. Aaliyah?
For sure. Thank you. It's good to see you all. So as Minerva mentioned, we've been working on a community engagement series that began in April that is completely open to all of the Alliance's member organizations and coalitions. This series was really created to be an open discussion on how to incorporate community engagement as a value within different sectors, of course, with an emphasis on the importance of lived expertise in said community engagement efforts. So in these meetings, we have been discussing strategies and really dive into how to incorporate this value into the organizations that meet up with us about once a month at this point. With that in mind, we have relied really deeply on our Hunger-Free Communities Advisory Council to give insight and perspective on the different resources that we bring up, and also to answer the questions that have been asked from participants at our very first meeting and beyond that first meeting as well. So in the few months that we've been having these discussions, we've really evolved from a starting point of just defining what community is to really discussing engagement triumphs and shortcomings and resources. So the space is very transparent and resource heavy. And now we actually have created a collective shared drive of community engagement resources to help guide our conversations that I can happily share to anyone who's interested. And if you want to be involved in our series of meetings, just let myself or Minerva know and we can get you all started.
Wonderful. Thank you, Aaliyah. And so while we do have a number of Hunger-Free community partners participating in that, it's also Alliance member organizations, and we will be sort of packaging all of those learnings out of those meetings and sharing them with all of you to help in your community engagement efforts, and as well as sharing all the resources that are being identified. And so we're really excited about that and want to continue these sort of small group themes. And again, a little later in the meeting, we'll be asking you to share ideas for future community of practice themes. The third strategic initiative will be providing financial support to your organizations and coalitions where possible. We understand that it's a very difficult funding environment for many of your organizations. So we will be starting a micro grant program for Hunger-Free community partners. The reason I say micro grant is that we are in the process of fundraising for this. We're hoping that this can be a very robust grant funding program, but we don't want to overpromise as we get this off the ground. So, we want, and we'll be asking folks to submit very simplified application for grants that can be 5,000, 10,000, maybe up to 15,000, depending on how much we're able to fundraise. To meet some goals within your end hunger plans, or to advance your ability to do some of your programming. So, do you need to fund a series of meetings, right, to convene new stakeholders around a particular issue, and what you need funding for is a room rental and, being able to, make sure that you have the ability to cover travel for some folks, or prepare a meal for some folks. So that could be something that you would apply for, or to hire a consultant for a short period of time to help you develop a plan around some specific strategy maybe that you have, or buy a piece of software that would be really important in terms of moving your agenda forward. So those are some of the things that can be done with a micro grant program. We'll rely on your creativity to tell us like what you might want to spend that kind of money on. So we're thinking at this point a competitive grant program, just because again we're starting with a fairly small pot of money to distribute over a number of groups. So once we kind of get that together, I would love to tap some of you to help be like peer review some of the applications and help us make decisions about where that grant funding should go. So that is in the works and will be something we talk about more as time comes along. And then finally, the last 2 points are to take steps to assist your organizations in moving along the impact scale. So the Hunger Free Communities Impact Framework. Hopefully all of you are familiar with this, but I know some of you are new to the network and you'll hear more about this when Amanda speaks. But we're going to be looking seriously at how we can help groups make transitions to really increase their impact through technical assistance and training and resources. And as you hear from Amanda next, a big part of her research project will really be helping to identify those methods and resources. The same with the last piece around our strategic initiative is improving communication at the national level about the value and impact of the work that you all are doing in your communities to address food insecurity. The value of this network is that we're bringing together organizations. All of you are doing phenomenal work in your states, localities, counties, cities. How can we better communicate that through the Alliance at the national level? How can we better, really develop that for lack of a better term, the value proposition and really demonstrate the value proposition of this network. And so that is something we're going to be spending some time doing as well. And then part of the research that Amanda will talk about, will develop case studies, for example, to really highlight some of the changes that you all have been able to make in your communities that can really strengthen the value proposition for the network as a whole. So that's the strategic plan, the overview of the strategic plan. And we're really a good time right now in terms of just moving along with the agenda. But I'm happy to take a question or two about this if anyone has any questions before we move to Amanda's presentation. Feel free to raise your hand or just unmute yourself and ask a question or a comment.
Minerva, it's Michelle from Beyond Hunger in Chicago. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about number 4, the steps to assist hunger-free communities in moving along the impact scale. I mean, I'm familiar with that scale a little bit, but what kinds of examples do you have in mind?
And honestly, this will be a lot of the substance of Amanda's presentation in a minute about the research project. But the idea here is, we have this impact framework that we developed, kind of came out of my head and our executive director, and then we shopped it around with a number of partners to see, does this kind of resonate with you all? But we are adding, through Amanda's research, adding some academic rigor. And what we would like to identify is, what are the interventions that help through technical assistance training, or just what are the resources you need to move from one stage to the next? And that's part of what Amanda will be identifying through her research. And so that's, I know it's a very vague answer because we're getting there. And I think that part of what we are hoping is that you all can help us identify, for those of you who are already in, let's say, the performing stage, what were the key interventions, strategies, resources that helped you move, from one stage to another. So hopefully that helps, and you'll hear more from Amanda in a minute. Thank you, Michelle. Any other questions or comments before I turn it over? All right. Well, in that case, I will turn the microphone over to Amanda Bankston, who will tell you about our research project.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. It's such a pleasure and privilege to be with you all. Can I get thumbs up if you can hear me and see my slides clearly? Wonderful, like the smiles. So as Minerva said, my name is Amanda Bankston. I am a doctoral student and a research associate with the Program for the Advancement of Research on Conflict and Collaboration at Syracuse University in Syracuse, New York. And a project I've been working on is really around hunger-free communities and the impact framework. And can you advance the slides, please? Great, and a big focus of my personal research is how can we help people work together to build stronger, healthier, and more equitable communities. This should sound familiar because I think everyone on this call has this kind of common interest, and we can advance the slides. And so just as a roadmap, today I'm going to describe a research project that we've conceived really over the last year or so, surrounding not only the strategic plan that Minerva just mentioned, but also some of the theories, designs, and implementation strategies guiding HFCs across the country. And we can advance the slide. So broadly, the goals of the project are threefold. First, we want to connect theory to practice through a really inclusive and participatory process, and that is highlighted here because I'm inviting you. This is an invitation to really participate. If you have questions, challenges you're experiencing in the field, or just stories of impact that you want to kind of tout, this is an opportunity to engage with the network and help us really build our understanding of what's going on in practice. Second, it's really around creating deliverables. I like Minerva's term around kind of a value proposition around this work. And now there are tons of researchers and tons of people doing similar work all around the globe, but we know very little empirically about what's going on. And sometimes, honestly, coming from practice, can feel like you're throwing spaghetti at a wall and hoping that something sticks. So we want to really provide tools that help us move forward. One is a revision or kind of reimagination of the HFC impact framework, depending on what you all tell us, and also the existing body of literature. Second is developing case studies, which we're calling stories of impact, which will live on the website and in other forms to help not only glean lessons for people in practice, but also, again, for funders and other people looking to support this work. Third is a report letting you know where you stand and how the network has evolved over time. And finally, we are hoping to get some academic publications out because the work you're doing is really special and unique and fills some gaps in our knowledge. Finally, we want to build knowledge around how you're using the network, what gaps exist, and what other support you might need. And we can move forward. So our research questions, there are really 4 big ones, but if you see something missing, please feel free to chat or reach out. The first is around impact. These stem from the strategic plan, and this is really looking at what is the impact of the network on participant organizations and then on into community. Second is around participation. How do you use the network? How do you talk about it with your colleagues? How do you participate? And are there gaps and things that you need? Third is around theory. I'm about to maybe reintroduce or introduce for the first time the impact framework. How does that hold up in practice and also against other bodies of literature? And again, what are gaps or additional considerations that we might use? And finally, trends. What are the things that kind of distinguish those longstanding, quote unquote, successful coalitions from those who struggle to get off the ground? In other words, what are those keys that we can pass on? Then we can advance the slide. So there are really 5 parts of this study. There's a literature review. I'll tell you a little bit about it today. Next stop will be focus groups. So today we're kind of recruiting, if you're interested in sitting with us as part of these pre-focus groups to help us understand, we'd really appreciate that. You'll see a network-wide survey. I know we get so many of them, but we'd really appreciate in the fall if you open that up and take 15 minutes of your time to let us know how things are going for you. And finally, 10 groups will do some in-depth case studies. And there will be knowledge sharing all around, but again, there will be assets. They might look like podcasts. They might look like websites, things that you can pass on and use through your work. We can move on. So first, I think you all know a little bit about collective impact theory. This is kind of the how underlying the framework that I'm about to present. And it really just talks about 5 conditions of collective impact: a common agenda, shared measurement, mutually reinforcing activities, continuous communication, very important, and finally, backbone support. Many of you might be part of a backbone support organization. This is a little beyond the scope of today's presentation, but one part of my research looks at collective impact theory and how it's playing out in HFCs. And this is really acknowledging the complexity within which all of you are working, as you know, and how you can kind of navigate and manage it using these tools. And we can move forward. And finally, this is our big what. What does it look like? What are you actually doing? And this is the impact framework we've been talking about. So if you look off to the left, it kind of stems from this idea of an increasing level of impact. This is divided in 6 stages, beginning at the bottom, awakening. You realize something's happening in your community and that there's a need for some collaboration. Then you move to responding. This is where maybe siloed organizations are established and maybe uncoordinated. And again, we realize that we need to work together. Coalescing is where those seeds of collaboration are planted, where people begin to convene and stakeholders start to develop some action around a strategy. Formalizing is really important. Some of you might be here. This is where you kind of institutionalize and develop your understanding of coordinated action. Individual organizations will start to identify as part of an HFC. Finally, maturing is where you see the word sustainability. And this is where some political and social capital, meaning those bonds, start to kind of solidify, and you really start to see the rubber meet the road. And instead of the coordinated action means that instead of a bunch of people doing the same work and recreating wheels, there's some alignment, and we eliminate that duplication of work. And finally, performing is where we start to see the fruits of that labor come to fruition. The community achieves high food security, and this is kind of the idealized where everyone wants to land. And so I did share a Jamboard link. I hope you all got it in the chat. We just want to know, for our understanding, how much do you know? Is this your first time seeing this framework? Are you very familiar? How are you using it? You'll see a spectrum on that first slide. And if you want to go ahead and place a sticky, identifying yourself along where you belong. And if we advance the slide, I think the next little green bubble will pop up letting us know to move to the Jamboard.
Hey, Amanda, the Jamboard is view only right now.
Thank you, Aaliyah. Let me fix that.
And I will, let me go back. I just left the Zoom to open the Jamboard, and now I'm just trying to get back so I can advance the slides. So give me a second.
That is okay. I have all of the windows open. You would think I'd get the hang of this one day. And are you now able to enter the Jamboard?
So, Aaliyah, are you able to enter the Jamboard?
I think just send the link one more time.
Okay.
With the can edit.
Let me stop my share for a moment because I'm going to need to just jump back into my share. So folks are in the Jamboard right now, hopefully. So have we resolved the access issue? No. All
I
right,
see everyone in here.
okay.
I'm sorry, technical difficulties.
We're totally good.
Well,
I think
maybe.
the issue is the link you sent was for view only, but if you get us a link for edit, then oh, there it is. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Apologies.
No worries. I don't think I would have been able to do that at all. So
If not, we're a tight group. Maybe we'll use the chat function and be innovative and just place ourselves in this group to move things along.
No, you're all good. I think that one is also still on view.
Okay.
How about this? If today's the first time you've heard of this impact framework, very first time, go ahead and raise your hand, use the hand raise function, or throw something in the chat to let us know this is new information to you. Super cool. If you're unsure, maybe you've seen it before, but you need a little bit of a refresher, throw me a peace sign, a thumbs up, use a reaction.
I think it would be helpful if people wrote in the chat. That way we have this,
Data.
after the meeting, we have it in the chat. So the question is the HFC framework new to you, or is it something you're familiar with? So maybe on a scale of 1 to 3, like 1 is new, never heard of it before. 2 is somewhat familiar. 3 is, yeah, we're very familiar and we actually use this. Thank you.
Thank y'all. Thank you for your patience and flexibility. I do think I just fixed the link though. Awesome. All right.
So for the other questions, do you want to go back to the Jamboard, or do you think we can handle them in the chat? What do you think, Amanda?
Aaliyah, do you mind being my guinea pig and seeing if you can get in there to the Jamboard? And if so, we'll push forward with that.
And Jamboard is working. So yep.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you. And we're getting some
For your
thumbs up.
patience. We got it. All right. So we can jump back in and I'll abbreviate.
So are we at 2 right now, page 2?
We're back on the slides. I have a few more things to get through before we'll
Awesome. All right, so let me go ahead and share my screen once again with the slides.
Oh, great. I see activity in the Jamboard. Wonderful.
And just trying to get to the right slide. Okay, so here we go from current slide. Is this the slide we were at, Amanda?
That is, and I think we can move to the next one. Thank y'all for placing yourself on the spectrum. This is helpful data. So we do have some pros in the room. It seems like quite, we're equally divided. But so what I've done is a literature review consisting of a couple parts. The first looks at the coalition level of coalitions across policy domains and all across the globe who are using collective impact theory to see what their life cycles look like. Do these kind of areas of awakening, coalescing, maturing, performing stack up to what we're seeing from the evidence base? So we look at about 119 case studies. They're younger than 1-year-old, ranging to ones that are older than 50 years old. We also look at 34 peer-reviewed studies that kind of glean and pull out some knowledge from some of those bigger case studies. And there are 9 theoretical frameworks that we weave together to support the HFC impact framework. And we can move forward. So the first time I looked at this, my eyes glazed over and I felt like a deer in the headlights. If that's you, that's totally okay. What this is acknowledging that the HFC impact framework is not linear. You don't cleanly move from one stage to the next stage to the next stage. So if you look at activation and collectivity, that kind of slope, that's how we imagine it happening, right? We take our step, we're awakening. We take our next step, we're responding. That's not at all what happens in practice. Looking at the case studies we're seeing across the world, there are loop-de-doops, right? There's a lot of progress. There are plateaus. This is credit to Ulibarri and colleagues. They call it an untimely death, right? People don't activate. All of these things can happen and sometimes simultaneously. So this is acknowledging that it's not a clean transition and progression along the impact framework, that it's a little more complex than that. And we can press our next couple of animations, and you can press it twice. When we kind of compare this against at the bottom, again, that impact framework comes back, we can kind of align and see what might be happening. And there are 5 key variables that I've identified across the literature that inform how people move from one stage to the other, what ages and how long these steps take, and also their success in achieving those outcomes ultimately. One is around activation. Are you self-initiated? Are you kind of a mandated effort? That really informs how quickly you're able to move through things we'll talk about in a bit. Process dynamics are really about implementation. What's happening in those meeting rooms? What rules and institutional arrangements do you use? Leadership. You're perhaps not surprised that that's a huge theme in how HFCs and similar efforts progress. Finally, accountability. And this is an area I'll tell you later where HFC really stands out. This is an area we can really make some contributions to our understanding throughout transparency and oversight. And finally, evaluation. We're used to talking about outputs and outcomes, but this shows that there's some deeper things to consider. So if we move to the next slide, and I'll move quickly here since we have technical difficulties. Awakening. When I say self-initiated, and my understanding from Minerva is that many of your groups probably are self-initiated, meaning it didn't come from a mandate. There wasn't an external body telling you to kind of organize. You're a self-organized effort. Self-organized efforts take way longer to initiate. So that first part, off to your left, activation and collectivity, might look like 3 to 6 months when you're mandated. When you're self-initiated, it might look like 3 to 6 years, right? So it's a very different space. Now, the caveat is that when you are self-initiated, that's when we see those long-term outcomes. And that's where we see engagement over time and ultimately more productivity. So we really want to pay attention when we're self-initiated to awakening, to responding rather, and coalescing. Whereas in external bodies, they ramp up quite quickly, right, with those mandates. However, over time, when you look at the formalizing and maturing kind of phases, they peter off. And you can see that in institutionalization, where you see that huge rapid decline. What that's telling us is that when you are mandated or incentivized from an external body, it's important to pay attention to those institutional arrangements, and we can move forward. Process dynamics are where the rubber meets the road. And this really, just to sum this up, this body of literature tells us that we need to pay attention to our formalizing phase. It might be the most important make or break phase for us in our impact framework. This is where we look at how we work together and we formalize those arrangements, and we can move forward for the sake of time. Leadership. Who leads in your HFC? Is it you? Is it someone else? Is it maybe unclear to you at the time? This is an important question, particularly when we consider that externally and internal question and the life cycle or the lifespan of these arrangements. When we're awakening and formalizing, it's actually quite common to have one or two cooks in the kitchen, right? A few leaders. Over time, a marker of success is in that maturing phase, shared leadership develops. So a huge theme we see across the literature is those 40, 50, 20, 30-year-old standing organizations lose that kind of traditional sense of leadership roles and develop shared leadership. And we can learn a little bit about why and how that happens. And we can move forward. Evaluation, the big question. How do we evaluate success? And this is important. And I'll just point to one finding here. It's not about just outputs and outcomes. In other words, those short-term things we can measure or those longer-term impacts in community. A really important thing that we find is successful groups have intermediate level outcomes, meaning they're just big enough to be attainable and just small enough to be measurable. And that's kind of a marker of success in moving people along the continuum here. And we can move to the next. And this is the big one for us. And as we're researching and engaging in focus groups and beyond, Aaliyah's work around the lived experience group, it really demonstrates some of the unique work coming out of HFC, but also some of the criticisms of the literature we're seeing. When we think about equity, who are we accountable to? It's not just the people within your HFC, it's the broader community, right? So when we look at engaging lived experience, when we look at racial justice frameworks, when we look at how we are accountable to community, those are things we'll be looking for in our research, and those are really important contributions to our understanding of how collaboration works. And we can move forward. So finally returning, and now I think we can push to page 2. Now that I have thoroughly gone through the HFC impact framework, I'm wondering where you would place yourself. Again, acknowledging you might be in 2 or 3 categories. Maybe you're still fuzzy, and please let me know that in a sticky note. If you want to place yourself on the Jamboard, that'd be really helpful, particularly as we identify people for focus groups and for case studies moving forward. And that is page 2 of the Jamboard. While you're thinking about it, and again, for the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. So the next page, while you're placing yourself.
Do you want me to move forward or do you want me to stay on this screen?
If you could, this is also replicated on the screen, so you can see the categories there. So what's next? Like I said, we'll be moving to some focus groups. That's the next time you'll hear from us. And we're recruiting people at all levels, whether you're awakening, you're maturing, you're performing, or you have no idea where you are. We want to talk to you about your challenges, needs, and approaches. Then you'll see that survey in the fall. We really appreciate your time going into that. It really helps us understand what's going on in the broader landscape. Case studies will come around in the fall. We'll select 10 groups. All of these are incentivized, so you will be compensated for your time and energy. And finally, we'll reveal at the summit, which Minerva just talked to us about, a revised HFC impact framework and build some engagement around that. Throughout this entire project, I invite you to reach out. If you're in the field and you experience a question, a challenge, a theme, a trend that you see, please don't hesitate to send it our way. It helps us build a better understanding for all of us. And the last page, with that, the last page of this Jamboard, and you'll have the link, is just asking you about challenges, about suggestions for us, and about questions you might have at any point in time. I'll be checking this once a week. Feel free to drop in and leave a note there. Or if Minerva, you press next, my email is at the end of this slideshow, and please don't hesitate to reach out. I really appreciate your time and participation. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Amanda. We do have time for 1 or 2 questions before we move on to the rest of the agenda. So anyone have a question or a comment for Amanda? And hopefully you're all excited to participate in this research project. Some of you may get more engaged with focus groups or case studies, but hopefully you'll all be taking the network survey. All of those pieces will be really important as we move forward in our understanding of the work that you're doing, how you collaborate, how you work in your communities, and what are some of those tools and resources that we can share among all of you to really advance the work. So just going to give another opportunity. If anybody has a question for Amanda or a comment, feel free to unmute, go ahead and ask your question or raise your hand.
Amanda, I just want to say thank you. This is, I have a ton of questions, so I'll probably follow up with an email at a later date. I think Mark and I are really excited about this, but this is just really interesting research, and I'm very grateful for you to share it. And yeah, it's really interesting, so thank you.
Well, thank you. I really look forward to your follow-up. We can talk about this all day, so thank you for your interest.
All right. Well, Amanda will be with us through the end of the meeting. So if you have another question, you could always put it in the chat, or hopefully we can get it in at the end. So just moving on in the agenda. So hopefully you're all familiar with our annual summit. We've been holding the Hunger Free Communities Summit now for, I've been doing it for 8 years, but before that, I think it was at least 2 more years before I came in. So this is our annual gathering of Hunger Free Community Partners to really highlight the work that you all are doing in communities, as well as bring in national organizations that can share resources, best practices, policy ideas around ending hunger federally, as well as at the state level. And so this year will be our last year of a fully virtual summit. And that's because all of you told us that you were really excited about this idea of having an in-person gathering. So as I mentioned earlier, through the strategic plan, sort of the in-person networking at the summit is something you all value. It was too late for us to move to an in-person summit this year, so we will do the virtual summit, but it's the reason that we are going to be doing a regional, at least one regional convening before the end of the year. But this year's summit will be November 1st. In the past, we used to spread it over 2 days. For this year's virtual summit, it will be held on one day, November 1st. We're starting a little bit later just to make sure we get in our West Coast friends, but it will be fully contained within one day. And our goals for the summit are to promote successful methods of ending hunger at the community level through highlighting effective policies and practices and programs for reducing food insecurity, as well as addressing the root causes of hunger, sharing best practices and resources, demonstrating effective multi-sector collaborations, and building skills among participants. So that is the goal of the summit, as usual. So these goals are not different. This is typically what we focus on during the summit. And this past year, back in 2022, we had a number of different themes and topics around these questions. So one of the things we'd love to do with the remaining time is have you all break up into small groups, because there are 2 main questions that we have for you. One is related to the summit. What suggestions do you have for topics to address at the Hunger Free Community Summit on November 1st. Now, remember, we will be issuing a request for proposals, workshop proposals. And I know in the past, some of you have presented at the summit, which we're really thrilled about. And hopefully you'll be interested in presenting again. So that is a request for proposals will be going out in the next few weeks. But in general, what are some of the things you'd like to see discussed at the summit? What are some of those topics? So that's one question. The other question is, for our next community of practice group, what would you like to explore? So are there particular themes that you're interested in discussing in a small group, more of a small group format with other partners around the country? So it could be, for example, maybe you're in one of the states where, SNAP is under attack. Maybe you want to meet with other states that are, sort of facing similar issues to discuss strategies, tactics. So that could be a theme. I'm just throwing out an idea. Another idea, might be you're in a state that's doing planning a universal school meal campaign, and you want to talk to other states that are doing similar work to really discuss, tactics, strategies, ideas for moving that agenda forward, since we know, unfortunately, it's not likely to move forward at the federal level anytime soon. So those are just ideas that I have, but, certainly we want to hear from you. What would be helpful to you? So we have about 9 minutes left. So what I'd like to do is break you all up into small groups and have you discuss these 2 questions for about 5 minutes. And we'll ask you to record your suggestions so you can share with the larger group. If there's time to share by just, having folks, share what they discussed, great. If not, you can type it in the chat, but for now, these are the two questions that will break you up into small groups right now. So I'm going to stop my share so I can go ahead and do that small room breakout. So we'll put you in groups of like no more than 3 or 4. So first of all, introduce yourselves. Hopefully you'll get to meet some new people and then discuss the questions. So, and you'll have about 5 minutes in the groups. So I'm going to go ahead and open up breakout rooms. So you should see that you've been assigned to a breakout room, and we'll drop the questions in your breakout room just so that you don't forget what they are. But if you can go ahead and I'm going to open those rooms now. Go ahead and select your room. And if you're having trouble joining, just so we'll help you out. But if you don't see it on your screen, if you go to more in breakout rooms, you should see an option to join a breakout room. So Amanda and Aaliyah, I didn't place us in a breakout room. Katie, hopefully you're able to join your breakout room. Maybe she walked away for a minute. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and take those questions and put them in the breakout room chat. If I remember how to, oh, broadcast, yeah. Just gonna take these questions. That's the questions. Great, it won't let me paste. All right. So the first question was, what is just topics? And then the next one was, all right, broadcast. All right, I'm going to start a timer. It's 2:55. So definitely want to end by, people are not going to have 5 minutes. I'm thinking I'll end by 2:58. That's only 3 minutes. So I'll just broadcast message. And 3 minutes. Okay. Amanda, I learned so much through your presentation.
Really?
Thanks.
Oh, yeah, thanks for the opportunity. I will send you the version 1 draft soon.
Well, it's going to be exciting to hear you present all of this at the summit. But I know you've been doing a tremendous amount of work on the research, the literature review, and so I know you had to force yourself to stop, right, researching this and just kind of like move forward. There was probably a lot more you could have done in terms of researching.
Well, it's you'll see it's at some different levels, but it's just amazing how many folks are getting this work off the ground in so many ways, in so many areas, and so many policy domains. we have a lot to learn, and there's so many places to learn it from. So it's exciting,
Right.
really exciting.
That's awesome. So I did notice one or two people left before we opened the breakout rooms. I guess they were like, yeah, I'm done. Um, so at 2:58, once you close the room, it takes a minute to close. So I think I'll close it at 2:58, which means everybody will be back at 2:59. And I'll just ask people to type their suggestions in the chat, because I don't think we're gonna have to, maybe we'll have time for one person.
Do you
So
want me
I'd rather give them another minute in the,
in the room? I can add a page 4 with these questions on the Jamboard in case it takes longer than the meeting goes and they want to compose their
well,
thoughts.
we could leave the meeting open, you
Okay.
know. But I'd rather have it in the chat, just it's easier for me to collect that. Okay, I have 2:58. Do you all have 2:58? Okay.
Yes.
So good on time. We probably should have practiced with Jamboard.
No, Jamboard always
It always takes more time than we think it will, right? I mean, it's not you, Amanda. It's like, trust
No.
me.
No, it's me. I'm a tech difficulties. I'm so grateful for you putting the PowerPoint up there. Like, oh.
So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 rooms. All right. It's like people 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Awesome. Welcome back, everyone. We're not going to have time to really do a group share, but I will encourage you to please type any suggestions you have in the chat. In the meantime, in the last minute that we have, happy to welcome anyone who wants to share something that, a suggestion that was discussed in your group. So just feel free to unmute yourself. In the meantime, if folks can just type in the chat any ideas that came up in your group discussion. Or did you all just spend your time introducing yourselves? That's fine too. So I think now that we're trying to make these meetings more interactive, we probably need to allot a little bit more time or put less on the agenda. So we'll be mindful of that going forward too. Organizing HFCs in rural communities. Thank you. How to implement policy. Thank you. Yes. Any other suggestions? We will, as we start to plan the Hunger Free Community Summit, take these into account as we think about topics for our next community of practice group. We'll definitely take into account. We're going to leave the meeting open for a few minutes. If folks are still typing, we're not going to cut you off mid sentence, but it is 3 p.m. So just want to thank everyone. And if you need to leave, we definitely understand and respect your time and appreciate your time and attention today. So you'll be hearing from us via email with some follow-up items and the slides that were shared today. So thank you to those of you who have to run. We really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Great. Community engagement, I love it. Thank you. Universal school meals, all right. Thank you. Great suggestions. Mark, so good to see you. Be well, everyone. right, guys. Bye.
All right, bye.
Talk to you soon.